I put all that into the shares and they went up tenfold within a month.
Wow.
All of a sudden, at the end of the summer, I was about to go back to school for my second year of A-levels, and I just felt like the richest man in the world. I got so much money, and that was the sliding doors moment, walking past a ringing phone and answering it, that changed my life. Yeah, it was still physical then. So every time if we needed to press 1 million CDs, the pressing plant would say, well, we don't know you, so you've got to put 800 grand down on the table because you might default. It worked really well. And it sold 3.6 million, I think. I don't know what it's done today, maybe 3.9, which is still the biggest ever self-released record in the world by anyone. Got to the end of the day and he called me and he said, look, I just wanted to let you know, I've just done an interview for Capital Radio and I've told them that I'm knocking the band on the head. Shit, how? I've got school fees, I've got a mortgage, what happens now? Jim Kerr talks about you really find out what's inside you when you drive past the stadium in Germany that you sold out 10 years ago to play the small club that's half sold out. You find out whether you want to do it or not.
Ian, welcome to the podcast. Good to see you again.
Thank you. You too, Alan.
Now, Ian, you have achieved, I think from where I'm standing, a significant amount of success in your industry, which we'll discuss in a moment or two. But I'm always at the beginning, always genuinely interested in what I call the founder's story, kind of the early days, how you got started in business. So walk me through that, if you will, from your very early days in business.
Well, I've been in music for almost 45 years, and I grew up in the Midlands, and I was 14 in 1977, which was when punk basically hit the mainstream, and that absolutely spoke to me. And I had a friend down the road who was a few years older than me who loved Deep Purple and Yes and all the sort of Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Yeah.
And it just seemed silly. It wasn't my thing. And then all of a sudden, Buzzcocks, Pistols, Clash, Ramones. I think the Ramones was the first record I ever bought from Virgin in Bull Street in Birmingham. And it just opened a window. And so at the time, I was listening to the John Peel show. It was 10 o'clock every weeknight. But before that, I always used to listen to the Financial Report on Radio 4 for the first minute, because there was something about the worldliness of hearing about these rumours that shares in Africa or Australia or companies doing things. There was something that was quite glamorous, and then I'd always switch over to the John Peel show. So that was kind of my start.
So you were sort of in your early kind of teenage years, combining in your head at least a real interest and passion for music, and this sort of emerging new style of music, the punk scene that was coming through, together with some sort of pretty traditional financial stories, and in your head maybe sort of weaving those two together, thinking there might be some career in this.
Yeah, I mean, less so the financial side, but what happened, and is relevant to me getting into music, is that when I was 16, on one of those first minute or two of the show, there was a rumor, because obviously now everything's instant, but then it was like rumors that things were about to happen. There was a rumor that the company called Premier Oil had struck oil in Africa. And I opened a share account, which as a 16-year-old in the Midlands was very analog, and you had to open Crest accounts and all sorts of things. It took a while, and I bought some shares in this company. I'd worked throughout the summer. I'd earned £200, and I put all that into the shares, and they went up tenfold within a month.
Wow! Right.
So I all of a sudden, at the end of the summer, I was about to go back to school for my second year of A-levels, and I just felt like the richest man in the world. I got so much money, and I bought a motorbike, and then I just thought, this teenage logic. Why am I going back to school? Like, it's really easy earning money. So I spoke to my parents, and unbelievably, they said, well, if that's what makes you happy, you should do it. So I left home, moved to a bedsit in Birmingham, discovered it wasn't quite so easy, did odd jobs selling carpet cleaning and various things to try and earn money, and always managed to earn just enough to pay the rent. And there was a slot meter for the heating and the hot water in the bathroom. But I always had this thing, if I could work in music, I loved music, and if I could work in it, it would be not like cheating the system. It wouldn't be like working. So I had a desire to do that. So around about that time, I saw an advert. I'm now 17 for A&M Records, which was the Herb Alpert, Jerry Moss, and they had the Police and Squeeze and, some great acts. And there was a sales rep job in the Midlands. So I went for the interview, didn't hear anything back, thought, well, obviously that wasn't meant to be. And so I decided, again, what was going through my head, I don't know, but there was a band called Japan who'd released a single called Visions of China. And it was just so exotic, this kind of like Japan, China.
Yeah.
So I decided I was going to place an ad in the Japan Times, Japan's only English-speaking daily, for a job. And I got offered a job speaking English in a Japanese travel agency. So I'd never been outside the country at this point, and I was a week away from going to Japan. What I didn't know is that A&M had been calling back. I was living in this bedsit which had a payphone on the ground floor, and the landlady who was in all the time was alcoholic, and she kept answering the phone saying, "Oh yeah, I'll leave a message. I'll tell him," but didn't. So one day, about 4 days before I was due to fly to Japan, I was leaving the building and the phone was ringing, and I picked it up, and it was like, "Is that Ian Grenfell?" And yes, it is. Yeah. So we've been trying to get hold of you. We're conducting second interviews, and we've called 5 times and we didn't get hold of you. But if you can come down right away, we'll interview you. And I went down, and they said, "Well, you've got the job. We wanted you, but we couldn't get hold of you, so we thought you weren't interested." And that was the sliding doors moment, walking past a ringing phone and answering it, that changed my life.
It's exactly what I was thinking. That's the phrase, sliding doors. You were about to go to Japan,
Yeah,
right, and really relocate your life, and whoever, who knows what would have happened had you not just been walking past and picked up the phone. So you get the job at A&M. You go, you show up there and start working.
Got the job. So I'm now 17 going into 18. I had a 2-litre GL Cortina and a boot full of vinyl records, and I was like the king, and my area was as far north as Rotherham and as far south as Stroud, I think was the southern point. And I was doing 1,200 miles a week, getting up really early, finishing really late, but it didn't matter. I loved it. And occasionally you'd have artists come out, probably the worst day of their lives when they had to sit in my car going around the record shops. But, you had various, people come out with you, and it just felt great.
So that was a job with all your sort of boot full of vinyl records, going around record stores and promoting them and saying, you need to stock this album or these albums in your store. Is that what the job was?
It was at the time of chart hyping.
Right.
So
yeah, then there were certain record stores that were on the list.
Exactly.
So you had to get in there and make sure.
Yeah. And so on the record, it was like, you've got to be nice to these people, encourage them to display your singles and play them. But the off the record side is like you're trying to get them to falsify. This is the job. We'll give you a certain amount of free stock that you can give to the dealers so they can falsify returns. And occasionally at the time you'd see ridiculous records that would appear from nowhere in the charts, and some of those records, is their only chart success. It's completely fictitious. But that started cleaning up with the advent of the Gallup chart machines, because then they could track. If at the time they were buying teams, or they could track sometimes the reps' routes by the pattern on them, the machines. So that quickly died a death. But I loved music. I was intoxicated by the records that were released, and always came up with ideas for new products or marketing. I didn't know what marketing was, but I didn't know I was coming up with marketing ideas. But that was what it was. And so then moved to London 4 years later.
Yeah, it just shows you the power of doing something that you're really passionate about. Because for you, almost wasn't like work, was it? You just you get to just talk music, be around music, meet some artists, be around all day, and you get paid for it.
Oh,
Wonderful.
Exactly. It felt amazing. And you know, free concerts,
Yeah,
free records, and if
brilliant.
anything came out, you could always swap records for the new whatever
Yeah.
record. It just felt, it felt at the time like life couldn't get much better.
Brilliant. So, did you continue in the same sort of role when you moved to London?
I didn't really know what. I went for jobs plugging records, and I didn't get them. I was always like the second candidate or third candidate, and I didn't know that I wasn't a plugger. I'm not very good at selling myself. I've got talents, and that's not one of them. And eventually, I got a job as a product manager for Polydor Records in Upper Brook Street in London, and worked my way up to marketing manager there. And so now I'm 27. I'm marketing manager of Polydor Records. Successful, earning a good salary, but I didn't love the corporate world, and it really. I think there was my father was a. He had various jobs. He was in the RAF Navy, but the thing I remember him doing most was shopkeeper. He was like had 2 or 3 small shops, and I always had this sort of thing about, like when Polydor said, "Oh, there's that new record. You got £100,000 to spend on it." I think, well, the record's not very good. Why don't you spend it on that is really good? And I always sort of brushed up against some of the decisions that were made above me. And so in 1990, I left that to travel around the world, and I spent 6 months traveling around the world, and deciding that when I came back, if I could work in international, if I could combine records and travel, then that was the answer.
Even better, yeah.
And so that's what I did, and I did that up to 97. Then moved to the UK company for one of the Warner's labels, became general manager in 99, but I was earning a really good salary, was running it. We at the time we were having massive success, but I was really unhappy. I just hated this sort of.
You just brushed up against what the corporate life, corporate structure, and just the way big companies are run.
Yeah, and at the time my boss had left. Another boss had, I think, resigned as well. And so my bosses were sort of in America, and they didn't really want us. I was just this UK outpost of an American label, and everything felt remote, and I didn't have any sort of role models or mentors there. But I was managing a team of 50 people with no one above me doing anything for me. And so when I got the call from Simply Red to join the management team, I jumped at it.
And was that the beginning of the creation of your own enterprise? Your own
No,
business?
what it was is Simply Red had massive success in the late 80s and early 90s. And one of the managers had, there was a falling out. I'm not totally sure what happened, but I think he basically resigned. And they needed someone to step into his shoes. And I'd got close to Mick Hucknall. When you do a number of 12-hour flights to the other side of the world and you share a glass of wine with somebody, without realizing it, I'd become quite close to him. And so when my predecessor left, that basically Mick and my business partner then, Andy Dodd, said, "Do you want to come and join us?"
Right.
And I was like, yeah. So I was part of another management company rather than it being I think I was a third or 50% of another company.
Right. Was this Silent Way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
so that was Simply Red's management company.
Yes, that I joined.
So you joined into them, and you got equity by joining?
I got a dividend, not equity.
Right. Okay.
And I didn't really understand at the time. I kind of wasn't really thinking too much about that. But then there was a point when I was doing a lot more work, and it was going really well, that I did think about that,
Right.
and started feeling slightly unsatisfied with the arrangement.
You did something, as I understand it, doing a little bit of my homework in advance. You did something, I believe it was with that organization in terms of, I don't know what you call it, self-published album, self-promoted, self-created album with the Simply Red album Home.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
What happened was, so I left Warner's, and the first thing that needed doing is that the Simply Red contract was about to expire. So Mick Hucknall said, look, there's this thing coming down the track called the internet. And I think this is going to be significant. And I see a future where we can just release our own records, and we can, instead of doing interviews, we can just put things on our website or messaging, and media will pick up on it. And everybody thought he was pretty wacky and had smoked too much at the time. But actually, it was kind of,
Yeah, it was forward thinking, wasn't it?
pretty bang on.
Yeah.
So what happened is the first month in the job, I was flying around the world looking at what offers were for a new deal. And there were some pretty sizable offers, but none of us were excited about it. And Mick was like, let's do it ourselves. And there was lots I didn't know about management, and I didn't know very much about the live side, but I did know about releasing records worldwide. So we set up a label that we call simplyred.com, and we had, I think we had 53 different deals around the world. Most artists will sign a global deal and have done with it and then be dissatisfied if a few territories don't work. But I was on a plane for 6 months to like everywhere negotiating these deals, and it worked, and it almost killed me. It just felt like there was no time for any sleep. And so in March 2003, we finally released the record, and it did really well. I spent a lot of time. Mick delivered the album and said, there you are, go and sell it. And I thought, it's not good enough. It doesn't have a hit single. And so twice I went back to him, and that was really hard, but there was no safety net. That I'd left my pension and nice salary for this. So I couldn't
This had to be a big success.
Yeah. And so I couldn't go into this saying, oh yeah, that'll do, well done, it's brilliant, because I knew that it wasn't good enough. So he slightly hated it, but to give him his dues, he sort of knew, he liked the honesty. And so when we came up with a single called Sunrise, that we just knew, with records, if you've got to think about whether they're a hit or not, they're not. When you hear a hit record, it's just
you just know that intuitively.
Absolutely,
First hearing.
Yeah. And the thing is, everybody knows
I think
it.
we do. Yeah.
You don't. If you're in the pub next door and you just hear an intro to a song you like, you're just there.
Exactly.
And the second you got to think, this is really good. If you think,
let me listen to it a couple more times. Then you thought that's not going to be a big hit.
And Sunrise was just one of those that from the intro, and I still hear it around. I hear it. Used to hear it in petrol stations, supermarkets, and you hear it, and it's just one of those.
Sure.
So that kickstarted it. All of the major label chairmen were very skeptical. You can't do this on your own. When we go to radio, we've got collateral with other artists. We promise them things, and so it's impossible for you. But it worked really well, and it sold 3.6 million. I think, I don't know what it's done today. Maybe 3.9, which is still the biggest ever self-released record in the world by anyone, I believe.
Still to this day.
Yes, yeah. And now, because the sales have gone down, I doubt that.
Sure. It will never be overtaken.
No.
Imagine.
I mean, a Taylor Swift record sells maybe 3 to 4 million in the US.
Right.
And she's obviously the biggest artist on the planet. So to give it a sense of scale, I mean, it was a hit.
So that was disruptive thinking. I mean, hats off to Mick for coming up with the idea,
it was
then
him,
for you and your colleagues to execute on it. But that was considered at the time to be completely revolutionary, counter to the general way that people released albums at the time.
No one had done. But Prince had done a few self-release things, but he hadn't put a structure around it. He'd sort of got as far as this is the way forward, but he didn't have the team, or I don't know what happened, but he didn't follow it through. Whereas this was a fully serviced, fully funded, it was, we realized we had to do everything better. We had to, the artwork, everything had to be better than if it was on a major, because it was under the microscope and there was a lot of skepticism. And so that was really the first one. And I remember at the time having meetings with various other managers, the Radiohead guys, Oasis, who were curious about it. And no one did exactly the same then. I mean, and they were right not to follow it because it was very cost heavy and it was too early, really. But they did different versions, and hopefully they gained something. I don't know if they did, but hopefully they did.
So it didn't become the kind of the predominant model in the future. It was just kind of too difficult to do, although people took parts of it and self-published.
And actually, with future albums, we, instead of doing 53 deals, we did 7 or 8 deals. Right. We did more regional deals, and we had a better eye on costs. And I think now in the digital world, you can do it very easily.
Right.
But then it was literally flying out and trying to explain to a label in Chile or Belgium or Peru what we're doing, and trying to take people on this journey.
Yeah, and when you're the first to do it,
these type of deals that they'd never done before, and why it made sense to them as well as us.
Yeah, and of course, as you say, the underlying technology was changing as well pretty quickly.
Yeah, it was still physical then. So every time if we needed to press 1 million CDs, the pressing plant would say, "Well, we don't know you, so you've got to put 800 grand down on the table because you might default." So we everything we had to pay up front for. So it was quite scary. On the day of release, we were £4 million down, and this had to work.
And as you say, it did.
Thankfully, it did.
Well, that's the kind of entrepreneurial streak, isn't it, amongst you, Mick, and the others?
Yeah.
In terms of, it was a big risk, hadn't been done before, but you said, let's go all in and see if it can work. And clearly it did. So that's to your credit. And what happened after that? Did you continue with that management team?
So my partner was Andy Dodd, and Andy was great. He had a property company in Manchester called Ask, and he was so great at being really comfortable around big numbers, and I wasn't. And he was looking after the money, and he gave me a lot of confidence. And he was like, "Oh, it's fine. It's only a few £1 million. The banks, this is tiny for." And so whereas I possibly wouldn't have been as brave, he encouraged us to do that. And then, but that was quite key, because what happened is, in the financial crash in 2008. Mick and Andy had a lot of exposure. Mick owned a large share of Ask, and basically the bank started tightening the belt, and the property market became very difficult, and Mick and Andy's relationship didn't recover. So Mick turned to me and said, "Right, I want you to manage me," and that was when I set up Quietus.
Okay, this was a new company owned by you?
Yes, yeah. So it was 100% owned by me, and at the time, so it was interesting, because I set this management company, a bit terrified but very excited, and we didn't really have any other artists. That Simply Red was the main source of income, and at some point around that period, Mick decided to disband Simply Red. And what happened is, I was at home. Normally I'd be with him doing interviews, but that day I had a really bad cold and I didn't want to give it to him. So he got to the end of the day and he called me and he said, "Look, I just wanted to let you know, I've just done an interview for Capital Radio, and I've told them that I'm knocking the band on the head." And so I was at home thinking, shit, how I've got school fees, I've got a mortgage, what happens now?
So you've got all your kind of brand equity, your company, your value is tied up in one artist who's just announced that he's disbanding the group.
Exactly, yeah.
That's a pretty scary moment.
Yeah, and so that was an actual moment for me, because then it was like, right, okay, I've got to go to work. And I was managing Brett Anderson from Suede, and Suede weren't, they disbanded. But there were a few things around that he was saying that I thought there was a possibility that they might get back together. So I thought if that's something, and then around about the same time, I met Simple Minds. I'd met them because I was doing some consultancy for a firm who sold USBs of concerts straight after the gig. And I hadn't quite realized I was doing it because it was a bit of money. And at the time it was like a bit of money went a long way.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize it gave me great access to other artists.
Right.
So my position was there was a lot of respect for what we'd done with Simply Red, but managers don't really know. Managers tend not to hang out. They tend to be lone wolves, and the last thing another manager wants is to introduce their artist to somebody else.
For sure.
So, but that gave me access to some other artists, and I met Simple Minds, and they asked me to manage them. And I'd been a fan back when I was a kid, and so they came on board. Jim then introduced me to Chrissy Hind, and she came on board, and it sort of built from there, really.
With the Pretenders.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and so at that stage you've got Simply Red, or Mick as a solo artist. Have you disbanded?
Simply Red and Mick solo, which wasn't anywhere near the level of Simply Red,
right?
Which eventually led to him bringing that back.
Right. Okay. So you brought back Simply Red, and you got Simple Minds and the Pretenders and Brett or Suede if they reformed. So you've got at that stage 4 pretty high profile artists.
Yeah.
That's unusual, isn't it, for music managers?
To have multiple. I guess. I mean, the classic is you'll have a manager who's been part of the journey of a band that's broken, and then they'll manage 2 or 3 other things that generally are less successful.
Right.
You get a few large management companies now. There's been more consolidation that started in the US, and there's more of that here. But you generally don't have. I guess mine's quite a boutique, very specific roster. Yeah. And I've always tried to manage artists that I kind of know and I know what to do with. I'd be useless with. A boy band or K-pop or something. I'll be absolutely lost.
Just on a personal basis, as a music fan myself, do you find yourself you're more encouraged and keen to manage bands that you actually like? You like their music, as opposed to just a transactional business relationship.
Yeah. I need to. All of them. They'll, when we're making music particularly, they'll be asking what I think or opinions, and I'll be quite opinionated, and it's from a fan point of view. I'm not a musician. I can't ever quite say, oh well, I'm not sure about the the chord in that bridge or whatever, but I can say it's taking too long to get to the chorus, or
back to that kind of intuitive feel that any fan has got. We know that you don't have to be a musician to know that. It's about the actual feel, the vibe that you get when you first start to hear a song. You give that candid feedback to them.
Absolutely, and I'll be honest and persistent. And I won't. If I don't think something's good enough, I'll never not say that.
Interesting. And so then you evolved. You've now got this roster of successful artists, no question, probably keeping you very busy. You remained a boutique firm. You didn't. It wasn't a huge organization, but then you got interest from one of the biggest companies.
Yeah. So what happened was I just started Quietus, and Live Nation started rolling up management companies in the US, and there was a guy called Roger Ames. Roger's a bit of a legend in the music industry. He owned London Records, which he sold to Warner's. He was chairman of Warner's, chairman of EMI. So big white Trinidadian, and bit of a legend. And he was involved with they were buying 50% of UK management companies. And they bought Quietus, 50% of Quietus, and they bought Quest Management, which was Scott Roger, who managed. He was, I think, McCartney's manager, and can't quite remember, but a few other sort of like decent size acts, and 2 or 3 smaller companies as well. And so that was and I did that because Simply Red. I remember the only time I've booked a private jet on my dime was that Irving Azoff, who ran the company, was over playing golf in Ireland, and said, this is before I'd done the Live Nation deal, and said, why don't you come and join us? We're in Tralee on the west coast of Ireland. So the night before, I'd been at the ITV studios where there was a big Simply Red special on the farewell, and I had a 3-hour sleep, flew to Tralee with my golf clubs. It was biblical weather. I hadn't packed correctly. It was, 4-8 gale, and Simply Red had basically ended the night before. And Irving was saying, I know how to break Simply Red in America. And I was thinking, don't know if you do, mate, because it's over. But he was just so enthusiastic and so impressive. And I just thought, I want to be on your side. He was entrepreneurial. He was one of these people that it put him in a room of people, and he wins. He's like a shark, he'll kill everybody, and he's still doing it.
And you want to be in his side, therefore, as opposed to be
rather than be eaten.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So again, I love these sort of stories. You just spontaneously, you decide, I will go and meet him, whatever it costs, whatever. I just need to get there, have the conversation.
Yeah, I wasn't totally sure when I met Roger, because I'd known Roger before. He'd been my boss once, and he's, he's pretty ruthless and cold, and I hadn't committed at that point. But I met Irving, and Irving's, when Suede played Coachella a few months later. I was out there with him playing golf, and he's on the phone to Mick Jagger. He's playing golf, and then he's on the phone to Len Blavatnik, and who then bought Warner's, and there's just this stuff that's happening around him that not only did I think I want to be on your side, but also it was massively entertaining.
Yeah, which is, I think, has been part of your career. It's a recurring story. Just get yourself into rooms with entertaining people that you enjoy being around. So that's great. So what happened? Did you sell 50%?
So I sold 50%, and at the time I didn't really have any thought of the exit. Yeah, because there was no Simply Red. It gave me a check. The school fees were going to be okay. Right. The mortgage was going to be okay. In fact, what happened, I remember clearly. I was sat at home in Sea Green in Buckinghamshire at the time with my wife, waiting for the check to clear. And I'd never had money, and all of a sudden there was a large amount of money, and I kept refreshing the bank balance. And they were saying, "Yeah, no, it's gone," and it hit at 11:45, and by 12 o'clock I'd contacted my ex-wife, and we did a deal to settle all the future payments. I paid off the mortgage, and invested the money. So this all happened in 15 minutes, and we went for lunch, and we had a glass of wine, and I felt the pressure go off my shoulders.
Wow. Interesting. You've been carrying that for years, because I'm assuming you get paid reasonably well as a music manager, but you're never accumulating real capital.
No,
equity, sort of money in and money out.
Yeah. And at the time, you tend to book tours at quite short notice. So for the long, the biggest pressure of a small business owner is opening the doors, paying the staff, paying the rent. And, we've got a tour this summer. Great. Okay, we're going to be okay till September. What happens after that? So it was very 3 to 6 months in advance. Now is really different, and now tours get booked up. I mean, I've got one tour that's already booked for 2030. But at the time, it was all very short notice. So I hadn't kind of quite realised how much pressure I was carrying until until that lifted.
Yeah, till the money lands, and you think, I can clear off my debt. I can, as you say, cover the school fees.
I'm okay for whatever else happens. I've got my house, and I've got rid of my outgoings. And I remember my lawyer saying, "Well, you've got to be sure about this deal is right for you, because that money will feel really, really fantastic for 24 hours." And then the following day, you'll be back to work, and it'll feel very different. And he was right.
That's how it felt to you afterwards. Once money's landed, you paid down your debt, and it was just back to work.
And then it was a bit like, right, okay,
now what do we do? Where do we go now?
Yeah.
And how did that evolve, that partnership, over the next few years? Was it as good as you'd hoped it would be?
No, not at all. No, it was. There was the dream of like the big pipeline of artists, and the opportunity. But Irving left a year after I joined, and the new people weren't that interested in UK management companies, particularly as my artists. They're big in pretty much every market around the world, except America, with the exception of the Pretenders. So they weren't paying that much attention, and so pretty early on, I was trying to get out of that. So I called Irving, and Irving's like, I'm always there for you, always help you. Went over to LA, popped in to see him on one of my meetings there, met his finance guy, who gave me a few ideas on the questions I might ask or how I might behave. And it took a long time for them to really pay me much attention, because I was just, it felt a bit like I was a bit of dirt on their shoe, rather
just
than
not important to their sort of core market.
Yeah, I very much felt the chill, which was good, because I knew that if I was that irrelevant to them, maybe they'll let me go. And then eventually, 5 years later, 4 years after I signed, it was 2015, they let me go. And coincidentally, that was when Mick decided he was going to start Simply Red back. And so we had 4 years where we were just drifting above break even, where Live Nation were involved. And then immediately it just ramped up, and then the other artists started really kicking in and doing bigger dates, and the live music started to really flourish. So after that, it was...
I'm intrigued about that as a music fan myself. The backdrop, you've been in the industry a long time, and we've talked about the sort of technological changes and where money is made in the industry now, because as you say, back in the day, you were sort of schlepping vinyl albums around, and people like me would go into the high street and part with their money and buy a record, go home, and there's a margin and there's profit in selling those. Now move to predominantly streaming, and not, although there's another story there about the resurgence of vinyl, and people's interest in that. But how have the kind of economics shifted in music as it moves considerably to live performances more than streaming revenue?
I mean, generally, older artists don't stream to the level of younger artists. There are some exceptions, but most artists over the age of 50 are going to earn the lion's share of their income from touring.
Right.
We probably see 80% of the income from touring, and most of that income is ex-UK. Probably 2/3 of that is ex-UK.
Right. Okay. So these bands they're continuing to tour all over the world.
Yeah.
I guess there's territories and areas where certain bands just happen to be more popular than others. There's a big fan base in different countries. So you make sure. So are your artists generally touring every year?
No, you can't go to the world too many times,
right.
And how can I miss you if you'll never go away? So I think it's important to have fallow periods, and also all my artists want to make new music and see the value in new music, and whilst it might not sell as much as or stream as much as the early days, it's absolutely important to their life force, and that's that they create.
Sure.
So you can't sit down and tell somebody, oh, don't bother, no one's interested, just play the hits, because they're not going to get on stage unless they can play some new music.
Yeah, I can imagine that. There's another dynamic, as I understand it as well, which is people selling their catalogs, selling the kind of the rights and the revenue stream as well. That seems to have been popular, sort of died off a little bit, but a lot of the big artists have already done that now, haven't they? They've sold the rights to their future royalties.
Yeah, there was a perfect storm with low interest rates, and I mean, one guy in particular, Mercuriadis at Hypnosis, really put the value into song catalogs, and he's maligned by some of the majors, but it was phenomenal how he raised $3 or $4 billion and spent that on music catalogs. I did a deal with him in 2020 on the Pretenders catalog, and that was still stands up to be a great deal, and
Sure.
There's not a day gone by when I don't think about would I have done it differently. That was the right thing to do.
Yeah, and it's apparent to me that it's important always to stay ahead or stay aware of emerging trends. You see, you've seen a lot of these things. That was something that was very popular, as you say, during that period of low interest rates, and people can raise capital at those low rates and buy these, which presumably they've got the rights to forevermore. Things. So just being alive to emerging trends and changes, I think that's important for any entrepreneur and any business owner.
Totally. I mean, I've learned, I think in my early career, I kind of wanted to be the first person, and now I don't want to be the first person. I kind of want to be the second through the door after it's proven.
Sure. Yeah.
Currently, I'm absolutely fascinated by the positive sides of AI in not so much in music creation, but more in just business and life,
Sure.
and just having that 50 PhD students in your pocket, as Richard Osman said.
Yeah. It is incredible. Some of the things that are being created right now and will be in the next few years. So you just to sort of carry on with the story, you're back to Quietus with your roster of artists, and you've taken back control of the business away from Live Nation. You carry on, then at some point you decide you got to think again about your own exit.
Yeah.
So tell me more about the thought process, how you sort of came to do what you eventually did.
So it's quite lonely being a music manager. I guess it's the same for all businesses. If you're that, you feel like people are preying on your artists. What if you lose a significant artist? What if you fall out? So it can be quite a sort of a bowl of paranoia and stress. But what the Live Nation deal had taught me is that side as well can be not a bed of roses. So I think when I came out of that and business started ramping up, I felt a confidence that I didn't have going into it. I felt okay being alone. I felt, I had a really great team and we knew what we were doing. And if any of these artists want to leave, good luck. You're not going to get treated as well as you do here. So I had this spring in my step. And it got to maybe 2017, 2018. I started getting people sniffing around the company about buying it. And before the Live Nation deal, I'd never really thought there was, I mean, it sounds a bit dim, but I never thought there was value in the business. It was a lifestyle thing. We're a service company. We earn money as we're going along. The idea, we don't have perpetual royalties. If we fall out with the artist, then they're relatively short-term deals. So I never really thought about that aspect having value. Live Nation taught me that obviously there is something there. And I started getting people approaching me about selling. And I did the dance a couple of times and realized how time-consuming and stressful and distracting that once you start opening your books to other people or engaging conversations and having dinners, just how if you're doing that, then you're not running the business. And I got offered a meaningful deal at the end of 2018. And so by now I'm 55 then. I'm thinking, maybe this is it. But it was just before Christmas. I took the deal terms away with me on holiday, and I thought, I'm not going to really pay any attention to this because I'm busy. I'm going to, when I'm on the plane, I'm going to look at it, and over Christmas, I'll think about whether I want to do this. And I looked at the document as we were taxiing on the runway at Heathrow, and before we'd taken off, I decided it was a really bad deal, and that it would make me wealthy, but it would almost certainly the artist would leave, and almost certainly some of the staff would be let go, and nothing about that appealed to me. So that was good to have that absolute clarity.
Who would be the natural buyers in terms of the sort of company? Are these competitors? Are they private equity type of companies?
It's a mix. It's there's private equity was quite big in that area. Not so much other management companies, because we were of a size. So if anything, we would be buying other companies rather than being snaffled up. But yeah, generally, there was a large accounting firm that had a TV talent division that wanted to expand into music.
Okay.
So it was
Okay.
it was a variety. It was sort of random, and you can never quite predict where.
And
where
you had a few conversations and dinners, as you say, just to sort of
yeah,
sound them out, see what was on offer. But
yeah, yeah, and
on the runway at Heathrow, this particular deal just wasn't for
yeah,
you.
yeah. It just felt wrong, and also I think I'd heard. Heard the Live Nation pitch, and that didn't come to fruition. So I was quite cynical, and I had a corporate career, and was didn't buy into that dream either. So I think I would be quite a difficult person to convince that I could be part of a bigger structure and I could work for somebody else, having never really worked much for other people.
Sure. So you ended up doing something a bit different.
So what happened? I became friends with a guy called Julian Richer. Julian founded Richer Sounds, and he's a phenomenal. He's quirky. He's interesting. He's massively intelligent. He's fast. He's the quickest person to reply to any email or text. He was like Irving is like that. If I email Irving now, I've not contacted him for 10 years. I'll get a reply before the end of this podcast.
Right.
And Julian was like that. If you want something done quickly, contact a busy man. And he became something of a mentor to me. I just loved how he did business. He was so ethical, so bright, and he was like, do you want to come and see me do a staff visit? And so I found myself one morning at his Reading store with him at 8 a.m, and he's talking to the staff, asking them if they're happy with the salaries and what they can do better. And I just thought, this is wild, like the fact the guy at the top has got such a connection with his staff and how loyal they were to them. So there are a lot of things I picked up from how he treated his business, and I loved that. And one of the times I had lunch with him, he was just finishing. So this is November 2019. And he said, "Oh, by the way, have I told you my EOS coming through next week? And I'm getting a check for XXX." And I said, "You didn't tell me that." And he was we literally walking down the pavement, and he said, "Look, I've got to go to the next meeting. Give me a call." So I phoned him as he was walking away and said, "Sorry, what the hell were you talking about?" And he said, "Oh yeah, did I tell you EOT, employee ownership?" So I said, "No, you didn't say anything." And he said, "Call Dave Robinson, my number 2. He'll tell you about it." So Dave put me in touch with a woman called Deb Oxley at the EOA, and everything I was reading about employee ownership just felt fantastic. It felt a bit like punk had felt to me in 1977. It just fitted. There were financial incentives. You sell your companies to a trust, and it's 0% tax. So that was attractive. But more importantly, it felt like a way that I could keep my company, could stay involved. If it was successful, then I'd benefit and the staff would benefit. It just felt too good to be true. So I spoke to Deb, who ran the EOA at the time. She was very generous with her time and gave me a really succinct, concise how this would work. I thought, well, this is fantastic. It's
And you'd never heard of it before until Julian mentioned it to you.
Yeah, I kind of, I knew
yeah.
John Lewis, and I thought it was this sort of warm, fuzzy kind of everyone participate. I didn't really go. Didn't realize. Yeah. And then I understood that in 2014, it was one of the things that Vince Cable and Nick Clegg got through as part of that short-lived coalition, and it just felt like it might work for me. So. And every day I have this sort of thing with large life decisions that I sort of want a week where if I like it on the Monday, I need to still be liking it on the Sunday before I do anything about it. And this was one of those. And I just loved it. And I went to one of the regional meetings they have here and listened to a lot of people's stories, a lot of people's negative stories about them, where the founder had basically just got the check and left people holding the business that wasn't doing well. But I knew that wouldn't apply to me, and it just felt like a way of sticking around and exiting at my own pace. So I did the deal. It was 4 months from hearing the term EOT to signing 100% of the company over to a trust. Julian jokes that his got held up, so mine was a lot quicker than his was, which he chides me about to this day. And I loved it. And I think initially the staff and my professional team, my accountant and my wealth guy at the time, thought it was some hokey tax scheme.
Oh, really? Okay.
No one realised that it was this sort of, cross-party government initiative scheme, and everyone was very suspicious. And they'd say, "Oh yeah, but there's loads of tax schemes. Yeah, I'm sure we could find some dodgy thing." And it's like, it's not dodgy.
Yeah.
It's like this is a genuine way of passing.
It's interesting. So you were educating your professional advisors at the time. They were skeptical.
I had a meeting in Manchester with my wealth guy and my accountant, and they said, no, this doesn't exist. And I took with me I'd got a book which I'd bought, and the meeting ended with me giving them the book to photocopy so that they could learn about it. And they've obviously since had a number of clients.
Sure.
Because at the time, I think 200 or so companies had transitioned. Now I think there's about 2,500.
So just without getting into the weeds on this, but the mechanics of it are what? You're a business owner. You own, let's say, 100% of the shares in your business. You've got options you can sell to private equity or whoever. That's an option. We know traditionally how that works, and people give you a check, and you generally get an earn out. But you probably, as a founder, leaving that business within a year or two, probably. So this is a different model. So you're no longer selling it to an external third party. You're selling the business to a trust.
Exactly. You're selling it. I mean, you have to sell a minimum of 51%.
Right. That's the key point. So you don't have to sell all of it.
No.
Right. But a minimum of 51. So you lose controlling shareholding.
Yeah.
You're selling 51% to this structure.
There's various ways of doing it. You can sell it to individual employees.
Okay.
I was worried that we'd got quite a young team. And if people started leaving with shares of the company, then it just didn't really...
It's messy.
Yeah, it just felt it would be messy. So the cleanest way was to sell it to a trust, which owns the shares in perpetuity on behalf of the company.
Right.
And the big question is, how do you get paid?
Exactly.
So I got the company valued. HMRC have to approve the valuation.
Right.
If it had been some new tech startup with some amazing discovery, the multiple will be a lot higher than my business. Deb at the EOA, Deb Oxley said, "Oh, you're like an architect. Your name's above the door. Your business is quite reliant on you. The challenge is how you move that down," and suggested multiples. And my specialist accountant suggested multiples as well.
Okay.
And then so we agree valuation. I'd been holding a lot of cash in the company because I didn't really know what to do with it, and I'm quite a modest spender. So it ended up being a third cash on day one. The scheme I had was a third between years 1 and 4, and then the rest between up to the 10th anniversary.
Okay. And you're still going through that now?
Well, no, what happened? Business picked up. So it paid off, I think it was 4 years after I started, 100% paid out.
Right.
So now I'm a salaried employer. I have an MD running the company. The employees are involved are on the board of trustees.
Right.
So the decisions are made. The operational decisions I'm still very much involved in that on a day-to-day, because that is separate from the trustee decisions. But basically any sort of fundamental company decisions are put by the board.
The board. Are you on the board?
Yeah,
Right.
I'm on the board.
So you remain on the board with your
there's 2 employees and my accountant. I had a golden share up until I'm paid out. So I'm paid out now. So now I'm just an employee.
Right. Okay. And the big win, or one of the wins, of course, was you were paid out free of all tax.
Yeah.
Which has changed, to be clear,
Yes.
as of the most recent budget. There are still benefits, and the tax rate is lower than a traditional, external sale. It's not quite as generous as zero tax rate.
Yeah.
So I guess if you're working out the margins that you probably would have got more selling it to whoever, external third party, but then you'd have paid a big chunk of tax on it. And the differences might not be huge in terms of the actual monetary outcome for you.
And you know what? It was enough.
Yeah, right. Well, that's an important thing, is understanding how much is enough.
Yeah.
So you did that and you worked it out and it was enough for you. But again, I think the more important thing is that almost that kind of the trust, the cultural thing. You get to continue doing the work that you love doing anyway. Now your position is altered somewhat. You're a salaried employee of this organization, which ultimately is owned by a trust. But in terms of, particularly in what I think is very much a human first people business, and it's all about human relationships, it fits quite nicely, doesn't it? With the team, with the artists, with the clients. Yeah. It seems to work well.
I think it does. And so it just allowed me to just stick around. And every time I looked at the options, I just know, I know what I'm like. I'm like all these kind of, artist managers. I'm a bit quirky. I don't like to be told what to do. I'll occasionally make decisions. It's like playing chess. I'll occasionally make a move, and it's about 4 moves ahead. That I knew that if I was part of a corporation, I might not be able to make that first move. And I mean, even talking about it now, I get a bit bad-tempered in feeling like being told what to do.
Right. Okay. So this really worked for you on a personal basis as well as everyone involved. What did presumably your artists learned about it? What was the general feedback from?
I didn't really talk to them because nothing changed. And it was like a mechanic. When I did the Live Nation deal, I flew to Australia. I was worried about how the artist would think.
Yes, of course, yeah.
And Roger Ames said, "It's easy. Just say, I always do deals for you, and this one's about me." And I thought, Roger, you've got no idea. that absolutely,
that's not going to work.
That's really not going to fly. So I flew to Australia specifically to have dinner with Mick, and he was on tour there, to tell him I'm doing this deal. And then I told him the day that it untangled, and he said, "I don't know what you're talking about. Did you tell me that?"
Right.
And so I decided that because nothing would change for the artist, and if it's definitely better for them than me selling elsewhere. So I thought, well, it's just
it just wasn't a big deal.
It just wasn't. It just
business as usual as far as they're concerned.
It didn't affect any operational aspects at all, and if anything, it made the relationship closer. So. I didn't hide it, and we've got it on an email signature, which no one ever asked me about, even though they must have seen it 1,000 times.
Okay.
No, it wasn't an issue.
Very good. A lot of founders and entrepreneurs that I speak to and people that come on this podcast, they talk about the concept of once they've sold their business, there's this kind of personal identity issue, sometimes a bit of a sort of identity crisis. Because you're no longer the owner of a business. I'm guessing that was less relevant to you because of the nature of this deal. I mean, how does it feel no longer owning a business?
I've never thought about that.
Your day-to-day is continued largely, but you've had a transaction.
Yeah, I've had a transaction that happened sort of underneath the business. I love the fact that some of the employees are quite woven into the idea of employee ownership, and it means a lot to them. And I think that's part of the business doing really well. I think they love the sort of, there's a fairness about it, rather than having this traditional structure where the news is delivered on high. I think they feel, not all of them. I think. And also, not until I was paid out. I think the first few years it was just like, Ian's told us about this thing, but nothing's changed.
Paid much attention to it. Yeah,
nothing's changed. So what is this exactly? But there's now, we distributed the bonuses more than probably I would have done, or if it was owned by somebody else, than they would have done.
Right.
So that's been great. And a couple of the staff have gone on the property ladder, and that's lovely in London. Quite young people getting on the property ladder is a real pride to me that they can do that.
It's great. No, it sounds like it's a real success story. You're happy. You got enough. You were paid out in a tax efficient way, but your life hasn't dramatically changed. It's not as if you've sold to private equity and you're off playing golf full time or something. You're still actively involved because I'm guessing you still love what you do and the conversations that you have. But you've got a thoroughly engaged team now who, via the trust, have a sort of stake in the future of the business and presumably are, as you say, deeply engaged, want the future success of the business because obviously it impacts them. It does speak to me about, human beings are, I always think, impacted by incentives and kind of what's in it for me. We all are one level or another, most of us are. And there is tying all these things together, I think it's a win-win for everyone. So I was really keen to get you on the podcast to talk about the EOT because it is one of, several ways of people exiting, capturing value that they deserve, having built up a business. And yours is undoubtedly a real success story for it. And looking back, I presume no regrets at all.
Not at all. I always had this thing in my mind, this analogy of a car moving along full of passengers with me driving it, and then me eventually moving to the back seat, and then me eventually sort of like getting out of the car, but the car's still moving along. That was a sort of a visual, and it feels like that. I'm encouraging the team to bring on new artists, so the artists that come in, the future business is their business, not my business. And we've made some good steps towards that, and we want to continue that.
Very good. This has been really, really interesting and very relevant to the audience. Whilst I've got you here, I'm just intrigued. I've got a couple of questions, particularly with your own unique backstory and the sort of work you've been doing. I'm guessing, you might tell me otherwise, that some of these successful, popular musicians and artists can be difficult, can be temperamental. And, we all deal with those sort of people in life. Maybe you've had more acute experiences, but how do you manage people who've got, big egos, very demanding, whether it's clients, members of staff? How have you made a success of that?
I mean, you have to have humor. And I had a couple of things really early on in my career when I started working with artists. I was junior promotion person at international person at Phonogram, and I was involved at a very junior level with an Elton John promo trip. And I remember being in the office one day when the phones were going and there was something had gone wrong, and I didn't know what it was first of all, but this was like serious shit had gone down and we were all going to have to move fast. And it turned out what it was is that he'd been doing a TV show, the San Remo Festival in Italy, and his private jet just left the runway to go to Paris where he was doing a TV show, and he'd left his toothbrush in a hotel room. And the task was to get some wooden handle toothbrush from Harrods to meet him at the runway in Paris before he landed, and that had to happen. And I just love that. And I just there's something about it which and I had a similar thing afterwards where I was with Metallica, and it was just on that Black album when Enormous, when they were coming through, and I was with them in Hungary, and a junior promo guy didn't really know what I was doing, but loved it. And I was with Lars Ulrich, and he said to me, "Well, we're not going on stage because there's no Evian. How am I supposed to go on stage with this Hungarian water? It's not Evian." Oh. And I think he was pulling my leg.
Right. You hope he was, but maybe he wasn't.
But we did get some Evian. And there's a side of that where you just kind of suspend, and there's things that have happened that are far more extreme than that. And there's a couple of stories I couldn't say in here, but I might tell you later. Okay. And when those things happen, you just go into this mode where you just do the thing that you need to do, and you're not thinking the whys and wherefores. And quite often when I tell friends what's happened, they go like, "Oh, I couldn't do that." But you just go into this, I'm good in a crisis. I'm good at blocking out the noise. Time slows down. What are the things we need to do if there's been, if there's a gunman in the auditorium, happens at one of my gigs, and everyone's looking at me for
Yeah, what do we do?
What you do. And it's the same thing with some of these,
Yeah.
Things that happen. You just listen to the artist. Invariably, they've got a good reason for saying that thing, that they're not playing with you or they're not doing it. There's a very good reason. And so you have to really listen to what's behind that and what's important to them, and get through that.
Yeah, just deal with the issue as it arises, and as you say, suspend anything else, judgments about whether this is a sensible request or not.
Absolutely.
This is just something, it is important to them in this moment, so I'll just deal with it as best I can.
Absolutely. And I've learned so much from the artists in how they treat business and some of their decisions, and some, quite often, like not going for the money, not going for the people, or they just all have different ways of dealing with things. And there's so many lessons I've picked up about not always trying to be number one, when sometimes it's better being number two or number 7. You'll have a better life, and it might lead to better things down the road. So I've used a lot what I've learned from them with their creative minds.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And the other thing that strikes me is, particularly the artists that we've mentioned that you still manage now, they have had particularly long and successful careers. We're talking multi-decade, 20, 30, 40 years more in some cases. Is there any sort of particular thing that you can think of as to how they've managed? Because, I mean, let's face it, lots of other bands have fallen by the wayside over the years. What is the kind of unique magic that the bands that you manage continue to deliver?
I love working with artists that have known big success and then they've not known it. Jim Kerr talks about, you really find out what's inside you when you drive past the stadium in Germany that you sold out 10 years ago to play the small club that's half sold out.
Right.
You find out whether you want to do it or not. And for me, I guess my sweet spot is those artists that have known the ups, known how cold it is, and then, right, let's go to work. And they realize they put their last 15 years or so into this, and that's all they know, and they're going to make it work. And so let's knuckle down. And that I love that phase. There are far better managers for the new artist, or the shiny new thing that goes up like a rocket, but that's not what we do. One of the top music business accountants in London said I think he was being complimentary. He said, "Your business is like a pension business."
Right. Yeah.
I don't quite see it that way, but I knew that what he was getting at, and it might be quite workmanlike, but you're dealing with known quantities, and you know that those people want to be there and they want to have that conversation with you because they're 20 years in, or 30 years in, or 40 years, or 50 years in, and it's really important to them, and you have an understanding that this is what we're doing.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, and congratulations for all you've done over your career and that you continue to do. Just last couple of questions, if I may, just before we wrap up. I often ask people if on their business journey they've sought sources of inspiration, whether it's they've read books or had conversations or people that they met. Are you someone that sort of studied business in particular, or read any books or watched films? Or
No, not at all. I don't consider myself a good businessman, only because I don't consider myself a bad businessman. I consider myself a fair businessman, only because I don't think in that way. I love when I listen to Julian about I guess people more than anything. Some of the artists and the way they approach business is interesting. Jim Kerr will often send me podcasts of football TV structures and things like that he finds interesting that I listen to. I got a good friend who had a bank which he sold recently, that just hearing him talk about business is and his exit is fascinating. I'm a magpie, get it. I get it from everywhere. When I was growing up, I loved The Art of War by Sun Tzu and all those kind of really I loved reading those books, but I don't seek out.
No,
I don't.
You get your inspiration by being around inspirational people, by the sounds of things. Yeah, just rubbing off on you.
I think that's right. And my challenge is more: how do you switch off? How do you get to n- 9 o'clock and not still be working or not be looking at your that's the thing. If I can get away from that, then that's good.
You're still struggling with that a little bit.
It's I have to work at it.
Yeah, exactly. So you're just wrapping up. What's the future for you over the next number of years? You're still actively involved in the business?
I'm still very much involved, and I'm trying to do less things that other people in my team could do. And there's certain conversations and taste and instinct where I talk to the artists a lot, and that's, I think, the irreplaceable thing. So as long as I enjoy it and can do less of the day to day and more of the sort of fundamental creative stuff, then happy days.
The fun stuff. Hopefully.
Yeah, the fun stuff, and I recently built a house with my wife in Dorset in the Isle of Purbeck, which is amazing. So, post COVID, we can work from anywhere. So I want to, I was in, as you know, I was in Indonesia in Raja Ampat recently, and it doesn't really matter where you work from. So just want to be a bit more like that.
Sounds like you live in the dream. Yeah, sounds, right from the beginning when you got that first job, which working in the music industries, you've followed that and followed your passion all the way through. So, as I say, congratulations on what you've achieved. The last question, I often ask this to guests on the podcast, because you've achieved business success, you've achieved financial success as a result of all your work over the years. When I ask people about a definition of wealth and what true wealth, it often different things come up. What's your personal definition of true wealth?
It's really easy for me. It's not having to look at your diary or your bank balance when you want to do things or spend. And the diary aspect is harder for me, but that's the thing I'm working on. But that's wealth, not needing more stuff or wanting more stuff.
Yeah, knowing enough. Brilliant. Thanks for the answer. Thanks very much for joining us on the podcast, Ian Grenfell. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.